Right, this will be another episode of the Best Damn League show period. Obviously, this is not the one with Dom. That only happens every now and then. It's a Not Dom one, featuring Yamato playing the role of Not Dom this time. Interesting detail. Normally, at the moment, I cycle like a little rotation of people. But the reason I did an episode last week that had Youngbuck on is because, one, if you think, guys, I can't give you on a plate, but if you think there might be a reason why I might not have been able to come on shows in the last couple of years, Yamato knows all about it. It just depends, you know, what the negotiations are behind the veil of what we all don't know about outside the industry. And then secondly, I also actually did know that you have to wait a while before you can tell some of those stories, because he was telling those stories, you know about them, where everyone uses that analyzer thing to find who like the next talents are in Europe and stuff. And even though the reason why it's funny now, if you listen to some of the stories, is even the ones people think are actually fails, Yamato, like they'll hear like, well, found Eminence. She said he's one of the best. It's like, guys, you still don't get it. That guy was insanely sick in his hands. He just also was done in the head as well, when he, like, his problem wasn't in his hands. Like, you know this, Yamato. Behind the scenes, it's actually, Youngbuck I know is pretty critical, because I know it's quite slow, the adoption for this sort of stuff, but that sort of thing has become like a bit hype behind the scenes. It's kind of like the underground thing in European League now, right?
No, for sure. Like I'm super happy it's the case, because it's actually restoring a lot of validity to what solo queue is. Like it's no longer just like you feel like a cog in an engine that is just moving forward, because like your performance actually matters. And I think basically my understanding is that they are like comparing all metrics they deem significant against everybody else in the player pool, and in terms of like the fine tuning where we're at right now, there's been like a lot of, you know, players in the game that have been spotted through this. It's like a friend of mine, Mephisto. He's super good at this, and he has like helped teams in other regions. It's like this is something that you can apply, for example, in Brazil or in North America. It's like these players are spotted, and like that's the whole point, right? It's like you're supposed to find outliers, and if you can access something like that. It's like I'm very good at assessing players that are brought to me, but I'm not good at like scouting ladders and like figuring out who's the next big thing. It's like that's something that you can't do with manual labor. So I'm very happy that it's moving in that direction, because in the end, I think as a GM you should tap into every player pool possible to then assess who is going to make your roster better, and for players as well to know that solo queue actually matters. That's bliss.
Plus that one story, I won't tease anymore, but if you haven't heard this one, you've got to go back and listen to it. Just the story where he doesn't say who the players were in his team, but I know it's even funnier. It's that he had some European players in his team, Yamato, and he, for real, had actually scouted Zeus before he joined T1. And he was telling these guys, like, we've got to get this guy in, he's really good. And they were like, nah, why would you just import some random Koreans? Get this, like, European player we know, which is like, there's only Europeans can have, like, because what's mad is this is the one area we don't get roasted enough, actually. I sort of agree in general. If you're going to make the best possible European team, you don't have to import. You could just make an awesome roster like G2 has many times over, a couple of Fnatic rosters over the years. You can make an all-European one. But we do go a bit too far the other way now, I feel like. And we're acting like none of these imports can ever be good. And it's like, bro, since the imports could actually be like Zeus and other top, like, potential super talents, there is a world where, like, especially once we get past the top one or two teams, I do think actually Europeans shouldn't overlook, like, really sick Korean talents, because you know this, dude, there can actually be, I'm sure you know this from your time in Sandbox, there can just be a guy on solo queue who really is the next Zeus. We just don't know yet.
No, 100%. I think, like, if I was a GM today, right, I would feel ridiculous if I don't look at every player pool available, because it's like you just have to, like, kind of filter them through the same criteria, because it's like I keep repeating this on stream. It's like there are Europeans that don't communicate. Koreans, like there's Europeans that don't assimilate well in Berlin. Like those are issues. Sure. Like all of those issues, you have to filter players through the same lens. And of course, with foreigner coming from Korea and so forth, like those might be like a little bit more like extreme. But you are aware of the risk that you take on, and then you kind of evaluate like what resources you have at hand. Because if you think that there is some virtue in having like full European roster because this is what the region wants, it's like I don't buy this at all. I think as a GM, you make a disservice if you don't tap into like all available player pools. And I'm sure there are gems all over the world, right? Maybe there's like gems in the Vietnamese region, but there's players that stand out there. In Korea for sure, because the ladder speaks for itself. But I'm sure there are players that are, in the mix that can make a difference for sure.
Right, obviously, a lot of past episodes of this show have been understandably quite derogatory towards Mad Lions because, I mean, has anyone seen them for the last split and a half? They were pretty bad. Like, they weren't even just bad at times. They actually looked like I think at the beginning of the summer split, they looked completely useless. They couldn't even get a lead anywhere on the map. Like, all the lanes had fallen apart. In fact, the irony of ironies was, it was pretty much only Super could even turn in sort of a vaguely reasonable LEC performance. Whereas, as much as people wanted to make it all about G2 when Mad Lions beat them, bro, they almost really did just beat Fnatic. Like, I think we have to actually somehow have like a moratorium on this. Obviously, something did change. This is definitely not the team I was watching play in the playoffs, the one that lost to like Carmine Corpus. That wasn't that team at all, but this just shows one concept that I've always believed in Counter-Strike. I know Counter-Strike isn't a game with cycling global metas, so there's a slight difference, but it goes like this. I actually do think people get too hyped up on the idea of like momentum, but between events. For me, momentum's more like how you're playing this week with your psychology for next week, with if things go the right way, it can continue and stuff, but it doesn't just go forever. Like eventually you have like a reset between splits. It might be after something happens, like there's a meta switch or a player realizes like, oh, I can't keep playing this way. Whatever it might be, once you have the switch again, eventually for me, this is why I think people get overhyped when a team has one good year, is if the constituent parts are only capable of doing it in that 1 year, in that one meta, in that one moment, then that's not really the team you have. That was just what you had last year. So the question I have to ask at the beginning is this, Yamato. Does this actually imply people, when Mad Lions had bad results, were people too cynical about the roster? Was there still like strength within the roster we couldn't see that's now manifest again?
I think, like, for sure, I 100% agree with the point that it's like the performance is so circumstantial, right? It's like there's so many circumstances, the small variables that can make like a big difference. In terms of like Mad Lions, I did feel like in summer that they lost the main edge that they had, which was in terms of their early games, they were very, very good. They just kind of, in the mid to late game macro, they didn't understand the benefit of pushing deeper waves. It's like when they pushed a deep wave with the solo laners, they wanted to hit the tier 2 as a consequence rather than connecting and contesting jungle and kind of continuing in the same line of thinking as they do in the early game in terms of how they contest camps. But then in summer, there was a regression because it seemed like somewhere along the line, they were like, oh, this is not enough. We need to kind of figure ourselves out. And then they lost their strengths in the process of doing so, and they tried to kind of band-aid by picking compositions that scale better, but this is never what they were. In terms of them being at their best, they're supposed to be the southpaw of the league. In my mind, this roster reminds me so much of what Vitality, like my own Vitality was in 2018, where we wanted to be unique in a way where we model ourselves around our own strengths, but also model ourselves to be very awkward for the other top teams in the region to face up against. Because when we faced up against Fnatic faced against the other teams, they were just mini copies of themselves, while we wanted to be very awkward and play a very heavy side laning game against their like bot-centric game with Reckless, and of course sometimes during that period also Whippo. So Mad Lions, it's kind of crazy that they found themselves. I think that the main thing for me that stood out that made them good in winter was just how Alvaro and Elioya played together. I generally feel like these two players heavily underperformed in summer and made Mad Lions look super, super bad. And then Mirwin just didn't use his massive edge in terms of playing things that he has the most matchup knowledge on, because in winter, I remember like preparing against him was very awkward. It's like, oh, they play Rumble against Fiddlesticks against Rumble. They play LeBlanc top. They play these champions. Screaming against them, like kind of made your wheels turn, and it kind of forced you to think so differently that your practice against other teams as you prepare against them was a lot worse. But in summer, they were just one of the group. And it seems like their boot camp over in Madrid, they kind of restructured and found themselves again. And I think with the downfall of G2 and Fnatic in terms of where their performance level is at, there is an opportunity there. And I like that Mad Lions have this level of confidence to actually swing from the underdog position, because this is something, in my opinion, that is lacking from the other teams. Like BDS, everyone saw that series against G2 and everyone kind of felt like G2 is going to reverse sweep them, right? They don't have what it takes to win, because against these teams, you need to win a couple of times and you need to believe that you can win. And I think this is the energy that I get from Mad Lions, like just Alvaro, Elioya performing again and finding, things that work for Midwin in terms of, bringing forward his strengths.
It's funny because obviously a lot of the, I wouldn't even say abuse, a lot of the like criticism or memery that Super got, he brought on himself with all those interview comments, obviously, when he was riding a little bit too high. But I've got to give him credit, actually. Dude, he actually is pretty good. Like, I thought in this series, what was he supposed to do? He pretty much did it. He did enough to win 3 games out of 5. This guy's, it's like, put it this way, even though Noah had the odd game here that was good, I think Super actually is a better player than Noah, mate. I don't even think that's hating on Noah to say so. Hasn't he sort of shown it now? Because he's shown it in the good and the bad Mad Lions for my money.
No, I was joking with Dom, well, because we were co-streaming that with Guinness as well. I was like, on the day, Super is playing better than Def did, because Def kind of ran it down against T1. Like, he had a very, very poor series, and like Super was performing. There was like he could have, if he in that moment in game 5 just managed to get the flash off because he saw the Rakan coming towards him. If he flashed over that Raptor wall, all of a sudden, you know, that would have reframed, like the Mad Lions winning that series. I think it would have been, his performance would have been so much more appreciated by the community, I believe, because it was just such a close thing. Because if he gets that flash, all of a sudden the fight is Super losing, and then Mad Lions probably win that game. But I agree fully. Like, Super was very, very impressive and consistent. And it's like the other guy, Fnatic. I don't know why, but when he plays against Humanoid, it's just Humanoid.
It's just his best player to play against, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's going on through Humanoid's mind. It could be like one of those moments, if I try to rationalize with no information at all, it's like he thinks so little of him that it's like he can't conceive the idea and like lets down his guard. And as it happens, it just tears. Like when he makes a mistake, it just fucking really like hurts him, you know, hurts him, his soul. Because I remember many moments where Huno was like, this guy's so bad, this game is won.
Right.
He said those exact words like 3 minutes into the game, and most of the time was true. But with Fnatic, there's something of a block there, I feel like.
The only thing is, though, like, what's funny is, like I say, I could have started this episode, we could have just memed on Mad Lions and be rude, etc. But what's sad is, I've purposely tried to frame the good things at the beginning of it, because, like, they're going to be at Worlds now, bro. We have to watch this, like, we have to just get all in on that idea. It's happened now, just what's going to happen. So we're going to see them at Worlds. But here's the problem. That is probably the most embarrassing way you could lose a series. Like, bro, like, I've seen a lot of stupid shit in my time in League. I mean, pretty sweet. You know what? I'll even be fair. When they made that, like, fucking $7 million Bjergsen Super team, I once saw them do a playoff game, bro, where they, like, traded, you know, their entire base for a dragon or something stupid like that. You know, like, classic, like, brain fart stuff that even veterans like Bjergsen have done before. But, man, this was embarrassing, the way they just let the other teams walk down the middle and just win the whole game. Like, that's only... Give me some thoughts on this. How does that happen, Yamato? Give me some... How would you even play defense for that? How does that conceptually even happen?
Honestly, it was so strange, because I think the example is so good, because it was straight up like 100 Thieves macro. There was such a tunnel vision on the Drake that is spawning, just forgetting all elements of the game. It just seemed like they tried to make the situation a lot better than it is, and in the process forgot how bad their position actually is. Because it's like the enemy has that threat to open down mid, and they have the position on the dragon, so you have to kind of pick your poison in that moment and kind of sacrifice the HP and resources to get information, to take that space. But in that moment, it seemed like, oh, we found an opening. We can enter the river through here. And then they just lost the whole game, lost the Nexus. I think what you meant is like, this is such 100 Thieves with the Bjergsen double lift thing. It was such a 100 Thieves macro, you know, just entering that Drake through bot is exactly those games. I think you hit the nail on the head, man.
No, it's wild,
but
isn't
the
it?
psychology of it, I have no clue, because I've been on the other side, you know. It's like Vitality, I don't know how many Nexuses we stole with TPs or whatever the fuck. So it's like, I know the other side. It was just all about like planning and just leveraging strength, because my Lions position was pretty awkward there, but they played it as bad as they could.
What do you think then? Because like I say, we have to actually acknowledge now, this team's going to be at Worlds, right? The one upside, if I try to spin a positive, is this. Look, the Merwin factor does mean, like, in a way, this is what everyone tried to say when you had your boy Adam going to Worlds. It's like, hey, at least they got like a weird approach, like it's a unique approach to the meta. Maybe you catch them off guard in a BO1. Like, there's probably going to be teams where if they haven't paid attention to LEC, but they wouldn't really have a reason to right now, that some of them could get tricked by like a triple flex in a top or something. That seems plausible. plausible as long as you catch the right team that hasn't scrimmed you or something. Problem I have is, though, that's really like all I can hope for. Like, it's hard to see this team winning like macro games against the best Asian teams, for example, right?
No, for sure. I think just as a point of comparison, I do think that like when I compare to the other teams, like BDS is like the main main team you would compare it to. It's like sending BDS and Mad Lions. I'm kind of in the state of mind where I'm more excited about a Mad Lions because I think that they have the right confidence to win from an underdog position. I do feel like they kind of play out. Play on mistakes of opponents and are willing to elevate risk in the game. I think that's something so crucial because I think that BDS's play is always so baseline and consistent. Well, I think there's many moments where Mad Lions kind of spike and find like windows where they perform insanely high. And I think that the main pain point, right, is that in that elevation of risk, they also lack that consistency of BDS where the amount of games they have lost from winning position, even against BDS. There was that 12K gold lead with Soul, with Nash spawning, where Alvaro just dives into the enemy team and then Jinx starts getting kills. And then all of a sudden they like lose an unlosable game 3 times. It's like it happened against KC2. It happened now with the open mid. At least Mad Lions puts me in a position where maybe they can put themselves in those positions, while on the flip side, I think with the BDS, if they are playing against a team that is better than them, that'll always be obvious. I think prepping against Mad Lions, as you said yourself, is just very, very awkward, and I think that's what you need to be if you come into a tournament as the underdog. It's like Mad Lions, like they could be a team that loses against teams that are worse than them, but I'm happy to risk that. Because in the end, it's like going to Worlds to beat like the Vietnamese seed or like a lower North American seed, and that's your ambition. It's not super exciting. While Mad Lions maybe can do some damage and confuse on the best day if their prep goes good, because it's in Europe, so maybe they go back to Madrid and enjoy the sun, and maybe they're going to be primed to do even better.
I'll even say as well, it's not just like the fluke factor of like, what if they get a weird top lane matchup? I'd also say as well, the part that people probably miss on Mad Lions is the real heart of that team obviously is just El Yoya. Like, it's fucking his team. He got to pick this whole squad. As far as I can even tell, dude, I can even tell when he plays in the game. Like, I don't have the comms, but like in English, you'd say like he calls his own number. It's like he just calls players for himself, bro. He clearly like does what he's comfortable doing, and he has like what I've always found interesting about El Yoya is I feel like people only ever remember that first year when it was him and Humanoid and they won those championships coming back in the mid game. It's like he hasn't played like that his whole career, guys. Like, for me, I actually think he's more in the sort of inspired vein of like he wants to be like on some level like a control jungler, bro. He wants to have like his vision for the game. Like, he'll invade sometimes, but you can tell he does it on a planning, and he like clearly wants to like calm with people and have them play around. Like that actually could also be pretty good for winning a BO1, because what that tells me is if you get the early lead, at least he can do something with it. You've got someone who's got experience, who's going to call the game. Like, I don't just want people doing purely random like Gigabyte Marine shit from 5 years ago where you could just like, you could get a few kills early, but then even then it was like fucking holding on to win that BO1 was a miracle in itself. So it's not implausible if they get the right team. But it's weird. The obvious type of team I'd like to see Mad Lions against is any like good LPL LCK team, but not a great one, Yamato. So like, give me like a D+ or something, you know, some team who thinks we're just playing normal league, who played this a million years. Give me the fuck it. So then they're doing like the aiming. Oh, which ADCs it is? It could be any of these 3, bro. 3? What? Then or I need it to be like Weibo Gaming or some bullshit like that, you know. Give me one of these like not quite truly elite Asian teams. Let's just have them not do too much work, you know. Maybe they tune in. Maybe they stupidly just watch like the first final and went like, oh, this Mad Lions team's all right, I guess, but they're nothing special. And then we just come in with all the quadruple, triple, gigaflex, 5D chess all over the draft. That's what we need.
100%. That's the angle. I dream of that format. I hope that works. It's like it brings me back still to the 2018. It's like we played against RNG and they literally like just spat on us in the draft. We got like Draven, we got the tank v tank matchup, we got the Trash, we got Rise, we got like all our OTPs in the draft, and they didn't give a fuck about us. They're like, they're just another name that are gonna shit on. And we took a win, you know, we took a win against the tournament favorite at the time. Shit like that happens when you don't have like a big name like G2 and Fnatic, and they don't recognize your org. They're not gonna treat you the same. I have always kind of felt that way going to the World Championship for sure.
What about, so obviously we'll do the BDS versus G2 series, but let me just ask you, since Mad Lions plays G2 again, well, here's the problem. Before, everyone could have a million corp angles. Oh, G2 knows they're going to win anyway, so they're just experimenting in the draft, all that crap. At this point in time, when you've won as much as they can, it's almost like a champion's right to have like 5 excuses like that because you're just so good, you never lose normally. The problem is, after seeing, if you add it all together, Yamato, so if I take upper bracket file where they lost to Fnatic, then I'll take the match where they lost to Mad Lions, say, bro, they almost lost to BDS. I have to actually consider a world where maybe Mad Lions actually beats them again. Like, it's not impossible. It's not impossible. I have to consider it now. So what do you think? Come on, it has to be plausible, right?
I'm with you. I think that this is what G2 have brought to the table. I think that in terms of macro, in terms of consistency, like in terms of just sharpening up, I do think that in Game 4, Game 5, I do think that they looked good against BDS. Like if that was the baseline, I would have been very happy. But we also saw the same sloppy Mickey, the one that gets caught a little bit too much. We saw them playing the Zeri, and Caps was kind of out of sorts too. I do think that throughout that series, they did figure out what kind of makes sense in terms of them succeeding. I like the adaptations when it comes to how they approach jungle with just locking Ivan and the occasional Maokai. That's better. But in terms of play, I do think that there is a lot of inaccuracies in the early game that Mad Lions can definitely abuse. I think Mad Lions and Fnatic are sharper in the early game in creating plans around jungle. And for me, it comes back to Yike and who he is as a player currently, because I think that as how you described Elioya, this is what you want from a jungler. Like they are the ones with the most agents in the early game, so you want them to take charge and create opportunities. I think this is also something that is true if you look at what global League of Legends is right now. It's like Tarzan with Weibo. It's like he is just invading, taking camps, always sharp on Raptor spawns, always sharp on Grom spawns. And that same thing over in the LCK, like when Canyon's playing at his peak, they're not far off in playoffs yet, but how I imagine is going to sharpen up. It's all about like camp timings and leveraging your strength. But I don't feel like that's coming from Yike right now. And in that, there is definitely like an opportunity, because I think that Mad Lions have the confidence to punish the mistakes of a G2 if they manage to give up like a 2-0 lead like they did against BDS. So at this point in time, while I do think G2 is the obvious favorite, I do think it was inconceivable to think that Mad Lions had a chance like maybe a month ago. But now we're in the position where G2, they don't have that much of a stock. It's like, I imagine that they probably win it all, but it's been dirty so far. So there's definitely like an opportunity there, and Mad have that, let's say, the energy about them that they can close out, if it comes down to a 2-0 position for sure.
As someone who's known as not just the X's and O's nerd coach, but who likes some of the psychology and the like framing of the team, etc. An angle I want to ask you about G2 goes like this. One of the things I actually find really disturbing isn't even just that they're losing or they're losing games where like people expect them to be a heavy favourite. It's actually this weird element, Yamato. It's because it hasn't yet actually cost them. Like, they did still win summer. So at the end of the day, it really gives a fuck if you lost once or twice, right? Then you come to now, they're going to make Worlds. They're probably even going to win this one and make it in first place. That's all well and good. But the issue that is disturbing to me is even when they lose these series, and notice, by the way, they never get 3-0 by anyone. They're always losing like 3-2. It's close. Like, you have to really push them. Like, that in itself is what's worrying to me, because it always looks to me like in the series they have a game or two that's shit early on, or just like really on the margins, and then at the end of the series they just start cooking, and it looks like they wake up like, oh, it looks like it's a scrim block blow. It looks like you start off really, it's too early in the morning or something. First game, whatever, that's the warm-up game, boys. Second game, you barely win. It's okay, don't worry, we're gonna get back in the series. Third game, they win, right, you know what, it's like the meme, right, sit forwards, time to beat our brother at FIFA. You go forwards and then you win 3-2, right? The problem is, if you keep doing that, that almost makes me feel like it doesn't surprise me those graphs come out, they win all the scrims, and then they always, by the time playoffs comes, warm up. But this team almost feels like they can get away with it, Yamato. I don't actually know if they understand how dodgy this looks already. Like this is like I say, this is going to be like almost the third series in a row they've blown now. They really could have lost that fucking BDS one. Do you think G2 gets it? Do you think I think they have the urgency? Does it not matter? Are they going to build into Worlds? What do you think's going on?
It's so tricky because the foundation of the success of any team is how confident every player is in the teammates.
Okay.
And it's always if you are playing the game and you have bad teammates, the limit of what you can do is very rough.
Sure.
But if you have great teammates and if you take a snap decision and you know players are going to play correctly, that of course reframes the whole game for you in terms of what you can and cannot do. I think when you are taking the path of kind of coping your way through to maintain confidence, the risk of a great shattering occurring is very dangerous. Because I'm sure, like with how the series play out, they're digging deep into their into their toolbox, which shouldn't be the case at this point in time. If we look at how we would frame G2 approaching this year, it's like, the World Championship was shit. They're going to use the practice in Europe. They have the challenge of practicing in Europe, getting better in Europe, and then going into the World Championship to do better. But now they are really scraping at the bottom of the barrel to make it through these series against teams that aren't insanely impressive. If it was that Europe leveled up and all of a sudden all these teams kind of caught up to G2 and they have found a way to attack G2 where it hurts, I would have looked at it very differently. But the level in Europe is not looking that high, and I think that's where I have concerns, because you are now digging into the experience, you're digging into the foundation, and there is a limit to how far your confidence can go. I can draw the example of when 2022 in spring, we beat G2 in the first round 3-1, and when we played against them the second time, our confidence was completely shot. It's like we just got 3-0 blown out. We didn't have a single chance because somewhere along the line, we tried to shatter what we have in order to elevate our own performance. And between those games, between those series, in that week of practice, you need to ask yourself: are you willing to break what you have to become better, or are you going to stabilize and just maintain and hope that's going to be good enough? Because that's where I feel G2 is. They're kind of in maintenance mode and just clinging on to the foundation, because somewhere along the line, they're going to be shook to the core and realize that what they've done to survive is just not good enough. And framing that to the World Championship, maybe taking a bigger risk in terms of whether they're at to address the core issues, maybe that was a worthy play. But it's so hard to judge because they are getting away with winning. But in the way they are doing so, is it going to make them better in the long run? Because sometimes losing the right way can be better than winning the wrong way if your ambitions are greater than, of course, just winning the LEC.
Put it this way, even though this might sound counterintuitive to a fan out there, I actually feel like, along with the narrative I'm setting up, it might have been better to have just lost Summer. To have just had that be the other way around. You lost to Fnatic in the final, and you were like, actually, wait a minute, this level we're putting out isn't good enough. We can't just go lol, and then moonwalk our way out of every bad series and figure, it'll be okay. We've got 2 tournament lives. This region isn't good enough for us. Because I worry about if this form is what you go to Worlds with and you start practicing with. Because I do think if you look at their team, I'll tell you a problem they also have, Yamato. This is why, as a quick aside, whenever I hear good old Nemesis fucking complain on his stream, he has the worst losers mentality ever I've heard, bro. Because he talks about Fnatic that's a dog shit org. It's bro, I can tell you've never been in G2 because you think it's Willy Wonka's chocolate factory and everything's perfect there. Bro, every org has issues. They all have you don't get the exact player you want. The coach has a difference with this guy. You don't know in the team. One guy doesn't like to gank for that lane, so they work around. There's always a million reasons why. But the reason I bring this up is because if I actually look at their team, mate, I think they're in trouble, actually, as a squad. Like, if you look at their squad, they have a classic problem that only great teams get, which is because they have so many good players, on paper, they could play through any lane, right? They could play any meta. They could play, right? That can be really bad, though, because one of the good things sometimes about having even an obvious minor flaw in your lineup is you know how to balance the squad out. You know who you're going to play for. You know who you're not. There's certain discussions don't even have to happen. So if I look at their squad and I think of some of the series they've played, every person can just get away with an excuse because there's so many other good players. You think, well, someone's going to figure it out, or we can just play through him. So I'll go through the whole team. Like, Broken Blade was kind of a bit sus in the summer. It looked like he was doing some weird lanes. Obviously, he probably should never have done that game 5 really, a draft against Mad Lions. It was a bit of an ego pop. But I don't really blame him. It felt like for most of the split, they treated him like, I think what's basically been his role in this team the whole time. He gets treated like the tertiary carry, but if he was playing for anyone not called G2, he'd probably be a primary carry. You'd probably just play through your solo lanes if he was elsewhere. So I feel like with him, there's always like a little bit of tension there of like, is he playing the Antonio but way better, or is he Broken Blade and can he have winning lanes and can he make picks? So I always feel like you got your tension there. Like, do you actually give him his picks or don't you? I mean, right now he's obviously a guy who wants to play like Renekton and Smash Lane and all that jazz. So that's always under the surface. Yike, I actually just feel like because he's shown us almost all styles of jungler in the last year and a half, I feel like he has to decide what is he doing. Is he doing what's best for the team right now, which probably is some stupid shit like just pick Sejuani and be a boring jungler, or does he want to be Yike and does he want to be a carry jungler and does he want to invade all that? Basically, he has his own dilemma there. Caps, the whole split, I was like, is he just purposely not picking this Zeri? Because Zeri shits on everything, every other region. I see why now, mate. That was just all right. Like, maybe it ain't for you. I don't know. Like, I can't believe he lost those Zeri games. I thought this was like the second he locks it in. Mate, think about what I'm watching every time I tune into the LPL. That champion dominates over there. And Sam has been pretty good, but here's the other problem. If he loves to win in lane, well, it hasn't been the split of Mickey X for winning in lane, has it? Like, Mickey's doing that thing himself where he's almost doing some perks level shit where it's like, if I make 5 mistakes in this game, but I get 1 or 2 cracks in the mid game at like a hero play that brings us back, does that make up for that? And it's like, the problem is perks and Mickey X. I've never had that equation on the blackboard, and I've never figured out what the answer is. Sometimes it is. Sometimes you make that amazing poppy ult play in a team fight, and we go, you know what? Lane and phase doesn't matter. Mickey's back. He got the amazing playoff. We're going to win this team fight. But then there's other games where I think, bro, he does have a lot of lanes now where it seems like he just fucking folds it in early or gets shit on. So I think that this is one of those rare times, Yamato, where I think fans who go, or other coaches or other players like I alluded to, who go like, oh, well, G2's just got everything. It's like, mate, that can make it harder sometimes. That makes it actually less obvious where the problem is, or who do you tell to fix it up, or who do you change, or what do you adapt at this point in time? Because you can see having so many options also means a lot of things can go wrong at once.
No, I agree wholeheartedly. I think definitely when your performance fluctuates too, it's sometimes very hard to assess where you're at. And in that process, you can think that you're better than you are, and you can overreach. Like that is something that is very, very common. It happened with us. So like in 2022 Fnatic, it's like we had this Worlds game where we picked like Caitlyn, Braum, Sejuani, Fiora, and I believe that we had Akali into Silas. It's like if we were a way better team, this is at this World Championship. This was like mind blowing.
Right.
Like, this was like, of course, like the DRX one with Caitlyn being OP, Fiora being very strong, Sejuani being OP, but we just weren't good enough to execute that. And then we just tightened things up. We played weak side top and we simplified and streamlined the process. And then even to that degree, like we managed to take games because we just played the same way in theory between the games. I think for G2, like in terms of the challenges they face as a team, it's like they always had to improve in Europe, and at the same time they had a very, very packed schedule. And I think that they managed to do it with poise in terms of how they managed to ramp up for MSI. But this is a very continuous challenge. They managed to make the game very dynamic for themselves because they implemented heavy lane swapping, because I think that brings a big layer of motivation because every day looks very different. But I think that when you are the best team in your region and the response that you get from the region isn't as good as you want it to be, stagnation is something that you have to like fight on a daily. And I think that somewhere along the line, it seems like motivation issues hit G2 in some shape or form, and there was kind of an assessment of how much can we get away with, because it comes back to what we initially said. It's like sometimes just losing is the best thing that can happen to you, because it's like a big wake-up call. Kind of reminds me of like G2 back in 2020 when they lost to Mad Lions. That worked as a big wake-up call, because they kind of bounced back and they figured out, oh, what the fuck are we doing? This is not working. And then they won a spring split after all. This was like the COVID one when they celebrated with the trophy in the back room. And I think if you are facing those problems and your usual strategies don't work in terms of bouncing back, this is where everything that you've done leading up to this point, you begin to question everything. So this is where it gets like a little scary. But going back to like your initial point, it's like when I think of the G2, the best G2, when they have very specific roles, in my mind, it is the one where they have an AD that is just there to push. So Mickey is enabled and he is allowed to have the space to pressure mid, to pressure top, to be very dynamic in his play. The main thing that is missing for me still is just Yike. Yike is just not there, you know? Like, where's Yike? It's like, at least in the past, it's like, I can like ramp up like and talk about all the strengths of like each player, but in terms of where Yike is, there's been moments where he's like, oh, he just picks the carries and he's going to pop off. He's like this wild gun that like oversteps sometimes, but he's going to get that farm. His team is going to set him up and he can be like very loose in his approach. And then it kind of shifted along the way. He became like the Maokai Poppy guy and he did that well. But now what are his actual strengths? You know, what is the best version of him? And you mentioned it yourself. It's like, what is the role that Yag needs to take? And it seems like he just needs to commit to something. I think like the Ivan Maokai approach, kind of stealing that from like a Billy, I think that kind of makes sense. But that's where I have like the most concerns, because in the end, like the best teams, their games always look similar between each and every game. JDG last year, T1 last year, Billy this year, Genji this year. The games look the same. G2, like they always are in a different puzzle when it comes to mid and late game every time, and they are lacking an identity worthy of the best team in the region. And I think that's like the core concern. So I'm with you fully that there needs to be like some kind of a greater commitment into something, because it seems to shift between every week. It's like looking how they won against Fnatic. It was just full scaling, and then all of a sudden they come back and then they just don't pick Koki anymore. It's like, what the fuck happens? Like they just pick Ken and Vi now. It's like, what happened in those 2 weeks of practice leading into the regional finals? We have no fucking clue.
By the way, in this BDS G2 series, what do you think about the fact that BDS is on red side all 5 games? What do you think of that?
I guess it's so weird, because there's almost like an agreement of, it's like the meta has been so same. It's like so similar for such a long time. Oh, bless you, brother. It's just been so similar in terms of what has been played. So to not have all tools at your disposal to threaten with like a third ban to make the enemy like feel uncomfortable about being on red side is strange. It's like no Rumble Prio. It's like Ashe Misfortune doesn't have the same weight. Support role as well. It's like Leona's permaban in other regions. So it's like just in terms of that assessment, I think BDS were very happy to put Adam on 5 pick, because I think that they viewed BB as someone that can get very weird against the blind picks. I think in terms of top lane as a role, I think most top laners feel uncomfortable right now blind picking, because like we have Nidalee. I understand how Miriam reached the point of picking Nidalee, because he didn't want to expose himself to any counters. Like he is more of the lane focused one, and then occasionally we have the K'Sante, but there's a lot of answers into K'Sante, and there's the Cannon that was tried. There's a lot of answers into Cannon. I think that blind picking is awkward unless you are very, very proficient at K'Sante, Cannon, Renekton, as we're seeing like a Bin is, or let's say a Breathe now in playoffs. And I think that BDS just wanted to make sure, boom, they are 5 picking for Adam, and I think that they wanted to be able to, like in their mind, there was no first pick that stood out to them as something that they need to pick. Like if there's no Rumble, no Rel for them, like they don't play Rumble, they want to play Rel, it will get banned, and then it's like Labrov just has, I want to play Rel, and if Rel is out, I want to play Rakan. There is no real like benefit from them in being blue side. But the fact that it is that way showcases and points to flaws in the champion pool in the first place, because I think there is an element of surprise that you can carry on blue side to kind of shoehorn people into positions, because in the end, they just banned Bromrel and they pick Nautilus every game. And the fact that that worked is strange when you think about it.
The saddest thing is as well, even though on paper it's not totally BDS's fault that they can't go to Worlds, although I will say this, I'm just going to put this out there. That benching of Adams aged very poorly right now. Just going to put that out there. All I'm going to say is that, well, look, we can't know if you would have won that 5th game, but that pretty much, because you didn't know fucking that, like, for the Mad Lions would be in the final, it turns out that has aged very poorly, I'm afraid. Like, if that was just Fnatic or G2, who cares? It wouldn't have changed anything, but that in the end actually is what's cost you, because what you could never know is that G2 would inexplicably lose to Mad Lions later. So put that aside for a second, though. The reason why it's sad is this, because even though I actually agree with you, if I have to look at, like, who has a chance to do, like, an upset at Worlds, it actually is Mad Lions more than it is BDS. Like, because here's the difference. Put it this way, I think BDS would have a way better chance, for example, of beating like some of the NA teams. Like, they essentially play the perfect counter. They just draft for team fight and they just do better team fights around Dragons. I think that would eat everyone who isn't Team Liquid up from LCS. But yeah, if you wanted them to play against like an LPL team, they'd get murdered, mate. And so one of the sad things is, you can even see, even at the end when they weren't that awesome, they still should have won this series, but they weren't that awesome, obviously, in this summer into now. They had a pretty bad playoffs. What's so sad to me is, this is why it's so hard to know what we're incentivizing in Europe. Because on the one hand, right, people don't want you to make loads and loads of roster moves. They want you to take a core and to develop it outright. That's exactly what BDS has done. They've taken this core, they've even taken the gamble when they took Crowdy out of the game, the one player we all thought was like the star player. It didn't matter. They've continued on even without him being pretty much the same team, just actually removed some of the issues potentially negative-wise. And then I actually do think as well, probably the best team in Europe at Band-Aid, mate. The amount of teams now I've seen them look and go, it's obviously not working. Do these cynical band-aids might just be like these two players, you essentially have 2.5 champions now. And it works. Like, they can get into these winning situations. So like, there are so many things, even though I have questions about the roster, there's so many things about BDS I want to sort of say, hey, it's not actually as bad as people say. Like, I could sort of praise this. Like, I think you would have still gotten beaten if you'd gone to Worlds, but you could have been potentially better than some of the other squads in the region. But this ending, though, I mean, in some ways, it's like fitting Yamato, because if they really have the ultimate mental block against G2, it does kind of take your appeal of really giving a fuck about BDS, because you have to be able to make us believe you can beat G2 if you want to win this region. And that's the worst part, I think, about the BDS story, is the BDS story isn't, can it be them or Fnatic? It could be them in the final. The problem is, if Fnatic's in the final, you think it's possible they can beat G2. The joke is, you now even think it's possible Mad Lions can beat G2, but nobody, including BDS players under fucking sodium pentothal / World War II interrogation systems, would ever actually say they believe they can. They know they can't beat G2 Yamato. This is the worst example I've ever seen of it. All the other ones, like, you know, they lost to like better G2 or G2 good. This one, they just lost to themselves and G2. You know what I mean?
No. I'm with you 100%. It's like I hate the fucking Adam benching decision, because it's such a extreme decision to make so deep into like a split. Yes. Because if the issues, like if something so extreme happened at that moment, it must have been so extreme that he shouldn't be playing the next split. Like, I don't know, kind of reconciliation. Yeah. Or if it was something that just was like disciplinary, then this is an issue you should have seen a long time ago. And this is something that was like talked about, you know, we heard like words about. So that part I don't like. But I have to give props to Striker, because they did manage to like make incremental like improvements, respectable improvements. But they have never been the team to bring anything to the table that is different than the top teams. And I think as an underdog, you need to be capable of shocking. You need to be weird. You need to be different. And BDS is a team that has made incremental improvements, but never at the pace of Fnatic and G2. So it's just, in those moments, you can just see in the Drake setups, they're sharper in terms of how super movement is, in terms of how they judge side lane. It's like BDS have never farmed 3 waves. And then finally, one time they did, in that series, there was the one time they shouldn't. They opened on 3 lanes with Nash, and all of a sudden lost whole Nash. So it's just very strange, because like, it seems like a team that is very well coached, because I think usually when it's like band-aid solutions, it comes from that. It's like we have these weaknesses, so we're gonna hide them by doing this in game. But eventually you face the music. You can't get away with just opening on mid and hoping that you get the fight and hoping that you are going to be able to punish the enemy's mistakes, because both G2 and Fnatic, they know when they face against BDS, this is exactly what they're gonna face up against. When they face up against Mad Lions, they're like, fuck, these guys are strange. Like, they throw tanky gold leads, but are we gonna sit there and hope that happens? We don't want to be that person. So it's like, it fucks with your mind a little bit more playing against Mad Lions for sure, because BDS is such a known quantity at this point in time.
And then another problem is, even though I actually think for most of this year, it's probably actually been overall the best season of Nuke's career. He's actually had some splits where he probably could have been the third or fourth best mid in the LEC. It's not even unreasonable. He actually's had some meta periods where it's even suited him. The problem he has is this, because Monty's one of those people who watches the big marquee games, but he's not watching every single game. He always tells me this, but I agree with him. It's like, it's not that Nuke's bad. It's like, but if you think about it, right, if you want to win the LEC with BDS, you're probably going to have to win a best of 5 against Caps and or Humanoid. Bro, again, does Nuke even himself believe he can win those games? When I saw him play Humanoid, he actually straight up, like some sort of old school noob, was trying to like 1v1 him and just getting fucking beaten, mate. And then when he plays Caps, it's not even in his brain he can win, mate. He's like, oh, well, shit. Hope it's not me that loses the game. Like, I don't believe it. I don't buy it. Whereas I'll tell you what, people might think, obviously it's not the greatest season this is, but I don't give a fuck. The reason why I'll always have a lot of faith in people like Larson is, bro, I actually do think with their style, they think they can be as good or beat these players. Because they play a different style of League of Legends, and they've done it before. They actually have the past historical reasoning to believe it's possible to win again against those people. So one thing I think with this roster is, most of this roster, essentially, it can be changed this year, Yamato. They're not making worlds, right? If you look at this team, I think this is one of the ones, because they're actually starting with a fairly strong base and they're clearly well coached. I feel like this is a team. You don't need many changes. I mean, an obvious immediate one, I discussed this on a past episode, is everyone in theory who's smart in Europe is going to be in the irrelevant lottery. He's available in this off-season. Bro, this is one of the teams immediately where, even though you might think of BDS, you immediately think of Adam. He's kind of iconic, right? Mate, if I could just get irrelevant instead of Adam, it's time for me to move on from Adam. You know what I mean? Like, hey, he was a canny player. By the way, on a smaller LEC team, bring him in. He'll be a really up and down player with a unique personality. But if I could put a player like Irrelevant into BDS now, I think this team would become really good, mate. Like, wouldn't it just take away one of my weaknesses? What would you counter it out? Would you push back against the Adam kick if I was to do that?
I think Adam is such a strange player to quantify, because I think in terms of how you wish a player to progress, I think he just grew too slow. I think their commitment to playing around how Adam plays eventually will stagnate so hard, because it isn't the right way to approach the game in terms of how, like, which summoners he ran. And I think somewhere along the line they tried to change that, but I think Adam at this point has a lot of experience on this belt, a lot of experience on this belt. And I think that you basically you get to that point where your biggest awkwardness and your biggest strength becomes your weakness. It's like you make the comparison to APA, right? I think APA, his improvement has been like, he's the most extreme one because his improvement is so obvious. It's like he beat Nico, Aurelion Sol, Ziggs. And that's what he stuck to, and that's what he brought to the table. He got target banned, and you could see his weakness. But then it turned into like a kind of a pocket strength as he was developing himself and adding more layers to his gameplay. Now people are facing APAs. Like, should we ban Ziggs? Is Aurelion Sol useful? Oh, he's fucking insane on Corki. Plays Tristana. Like, there's been a clear progression of growth, and Adam has so many years on his belt now that inconsistency in his play is not something that you can get away with, especially from a top lane position. I did think that he had like a fine series against G2. It was like all right. Like, he had like an okay Rumble game, like an Olaf angle that he dropped. You know, that was all right. But I think top lane is a position where you're kind of hoping that you don't have that same level of risk, especially when your bot lane is Labrov and also, of course, Ice.
Yeah.
Like, those players are really good. So you're kind of hoping that you have like a stable rock. I think in regards to the conversation about relevant, I think he's a very, very intriguing player because I think mechanically he's super, super good. Like I always make the comparison that like he is. Bless you, brother. Bless you. I make the comparison that Alfari is living still in the league and it's through irrelevant, you know. And
Oh, sure.
like I think that Alfari is a player that is like people talk about negatively, but like in terms of his laning, in terms of like how consistent he is, in terms of just his laning outputs and his like early to mid game was super, super good. What I want to see more from is that relevant that we saw, I believe, in spring, where he was playing Gwen and like carrying late game fights and found like moments to fight around, rather than the one that we saw in, of course, summer, where he gained leads and then his team just couldn't find the fights. But the relevant, I think, is a player that has potential. He would look interesting on this roster. I think the main thing for me is like I could see a world where like I'm looking at Shio as well, because I feel like jungle is a position that is fairly stacked. It's like now when I'm looking over North America, it's like Inspire's looking so good. It's kind of sad that he's not playing over in Europe, you know. I think that people are a little bit too overly sensitive about how they viewed this name because of like past stories of how, let's say, intense he can be in a team environment, you know. But I think in the end, it's like if a player is fucking good, you should be able to find a way to make it work and to accommodate. And Inspired is definitely like a player that is worth it, but maybe that's too far off in the future to even consider. But they did take one of the good ones, FlyQuest.
Well, here's the thing. They did also take Whipple, so, you know, they evened it out. That's called balance. You know, in the same way, Yamato. In the same way, Yamato, is if you're the company that dumps a bunch of toxic waste somewhere, you better also make like a fucking tree park for koala bears, you know. So anyway, whatever. It's all good.
I think he's doing good. He's doing
It's
good.
all harmless banter. It's all harmless banter. No, here's the angle that we have to go on now, Yamato. This is going to be like the closing topic. Obviously, we need to talk about Fnatic. So here's the angle we're going to talk about Fnatic, right? Fuck all the negativity. Every other show, I don't even need to watch them. They're all going to go like this. Oh, G2 will probably beat Mad Lions, then they'll probably beat Fnatic, and G2 will win anyway. And then, you know, in the end, it was all just like a distract. No, here's the thing. As someone who used to, one, coach Fnatic, and two, used to literally coach Razork and Humanoid. They're your boys. So I'm just saying this right now. All the past splits of like, if we're ever going to beat G2, now, no, now's the time if you're ever going to beat G2, you're going to beat them. First of all, Mad Lions might even do you the favour. And then secondly, if they don't, bro, I'd say it this way. If you as Fnatic now, from the upper bracket, can sit in that final, even if you play G2, you have to believe it's possible to beat them. Come on, look at what you've seen in the last month. Look how many times they almost have lost. Like, for real, they have not only been beaten, they almost could have lost before. They could have lost to BDS twice, by the way, in the last, like, month or so. Like, if you are Fnatic, if you are Razork, I don't care how good you think G2 is, I don't care what the scrims are, you have to believe this final is ours to win. You know that great Jose Mourinho quote, finals aren't for playing, they're for winning. Fuck like, oh, but we were second, oh, second's pretty good. If you're Fnatic, this is the split to win, bro. This is it. You win the season finals, this is your chance to win.
100%, bro. Like the fucking the way they lost is such freak accidents. There's no way that shit's gonna happen again. And like their positions were so damn good, and I think that when it comes to like playing in front of a crowd, the energy is going to be just right for Humanoids. I think just the biggest mismatch is of course Razor against Yike. I think on paper, Fnatic, you know, is looking poised to fucking win it.
Why not? Yeah.
And it's just the main thing for me is like June's performance was pretty fucking bad against Mad Lions. I feel like it's like that guy has been really, really up and down. Noah, it's a known quantity. That's something that like we can measure. Like he's decent, but then he has like these moments that are just.
It's not even that he bombs all the games, Yamato. Like I'm a hater, but I'm not going to pretend he'll have like 4 or 5 bad games every time. The problem he has is he does the Niski. He'll just have one game, he'll completely throw himself. You know what I mean? Like just get like the craziest, get caught in the worst way possible. So yeah, if he does that, that's what scares you if you're watching Noah, I think.
For sure, it's just I think it was just like a freak connection. It's like that 3-0 shouldn't be able to ever happen again. It shouldn't be able to happen ever again. And I hope that they have managed to like frame it the right way. It's like they're carrying a lot of fucking luggage coming into that finals, and G2 on the other side kind of have, you know, the opposite of like maybe coming into it with the right state of mind, because like I had the pleasure of talking with them like about a week ago, and BB told me, he's like, we are back, we're gonna win it all, we are back.
Okay.
We had 2 weeks when we were shit and we didn't know what we were doing, but we are back, he told me. And it's like, then I saw them play against BDS, I was like, are you back? I'm not fucking sure, but this is definitely like the moment to fucking win. It's like I fucking beat myself up over 2022 summer. I always think about this fucking split as like the biggest failure, because that was a split to win.
Sure.
Like the teams weren't good.
Yes.
And it's like me losing against a team that is really fucking insane. Like I accept that for what that is. But that was a split to win. Like that G2 was very fucking weak. Very, very fucking weak. And you gotta fucking pounce at that, you know. You gotta strike hard. And this is the moment for Fnatic to do so, because, you know, fuck it. This needs to be it, yeah.
I see what you mean, because that's the part people don't think about, isn't it? If everyone thinks about that summer 2022 final, if they're G2, they go, hey, we still almost won. If you're Rogue, you're like, oh, brilliant job. But what people aren't thinking about is, think, guys, after the first game of that low bracket match where Humanoid did that godlike fucking Azir play, what was it, Azir, or was it like fucking Silas? Or Silas, there you go. Yeah. When he did that godlike play on game one, in their brain, they were like, oh my God, we're going to beat Rogue and win the LEC. Holy shit. And then obviously it went downhill after that. They thought that when you were watching Rogue beat them, and you were like, that should be us. That's supposed to be us winning this game, right?
We couldn't watch the finals, by the way. Like we were sitting like in the fucking upper row, and we saw like the opening ceremony, and like I've never experienced so much fucking just feeling like a piece of shit, you know? It was just so painful. Like we all just walked out the stadium. It's like my parents, like my mom and brother was there. It's like, should we watch the finals? Can we watch it? I was like, fuck.
Oh, I didn't even thought of that. That's even worse because you're from Sweden, so you were like, this should be your moment, right? Okay, mom and dad, watch this. I'm about to win LEC. I know, that's even worse.
It was rough, man. It was rough. It's yeah, just painful.
Exactly. So basically, that's where we're going to end the episode, because that's the feeling I want Fnatic to think about now before the game. Do you want to be sat in 3-4 years on a talk show talking about what could have been the time you could have won LEC, or do you actually want to be a champion and say, I beat Caps? I mean, everyone else does it nowadays anyway, so why don't you get on with it? And that's enough from me and not Dom. Will it be Dom next week? Probably will be. That's it.